Hello there, my name is Sixo, but more on that later as we're all a bit under siege over here. Yes, today we're taking a look at the very exciting new release from toy manufacturer ThreeZero. This is their take on War for Cybertron's Siege Optimus Prime. And it's worth me mentioning right off the bat that this is an officially licensed product which is clear from the presence of brand logos all over the packaging. It's not third party, as I know some people sometimes think. And yes, it's non-transformable as well, which never fails to cause a bit of commentary, particularly when there already is a transforming toy of this character available within the main Generations Siege line itself, of course. However, I'm quite sure that when you see this thing in action today, you'll agree with me that it's really quite breathtaking and certainly earns its right to exist along the more mainstream offering. Last thing before we begin, this review comes courtesy of the wonderful TF Source, so you will of course find a link to their site in the video description below. I'd also be very grateful if you could leave me a like if you enjoyed today's offering, and maybe even subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I'll also leave a link in the description for my Patreon, where as well as exclusive early access to videos like this, you can find many other fantastic perks, so if you do want to support me then please check that out. So anyway, the box today is looking really rather swish, with a very moody recreation of the toy on the front and a sort of graffitied Autobot logo adorning the back, so that's quite nice. I also love that the box contains a little flap with a window showcasing the contents inside, as despite the fact that Prime is just kind of lying there inside a plastic bag, it all looks really rather tantalizing. But enough of that, as it's time to go ahead and get him out of there, and the first thing you'll notice is that there's an absolutely massive clamshell going on. In fact, it's a double layer job, with the toy and most of the accessories up top and the instructions and display stand down below. So let's get all of this stuff out of the packaging and take a look at everything that's included, as it's all really rather exciting. First up, we get the character's main rifle, which looks very reminiscent of the equivalent classic depiction. You also get this thing, which I initially thought was some sort of novelty badge item, but it turns out it's an energon shield apparently. And my axe! And then there's this really rather imposing hatchet, which I simply cannot wait to see in action. Several sets of hands, as although this toy is super posable, the hands on all of their deluxe figures need to be swapped out as they're not articulated as such. This backpack piece, which doesn't really do anything but does recreate the character's signature kibble from the cartoon design. And finally, just like the rest of ThreeZero's output, there's this really rather nifty looking display stand, this time with the Siege logo proudly adorning the top of it. Now here you just want to go ahead and plug the main arm into the base, which is really very simple to do, and that leaves you with a decent range of movement which should allow for all kinds of poses. That said, I have to be honest that I've never used one of these stands on any of ThreeZero's stuff so far, as they're always very stable without them, so I would imagine this will likely just stay in the box. And of course you get the toy itself, which needs removing from his little bag, and then you just want to get rid of the bits of padding that are included on his hips and his ankles. Then we're going to install some batteries to get his light up gimmicks working. You need to remove the small screw in his back, which enables you to take out the head section. You'll find the battery compartment underneath, and you want to simply install two AG13 batteries, which go in very easily. Next, just flip the tiny switch on the front of the head section and you'll see the eyes light up straight away. Then just put the headpiece back in place, which also activates the light up windows in his chest in an extremely satisfying feature. And I really think that looks absolutely fantastic. Now in theory you should put that screw back in place, but I might just not bother, as you'd need to remove it every time you want to turn the lights on and off, and that's a bit of a weird solution in my opinion. Either way, it's time to install his backpack piece, which just clips in nicely, and then you're done. Which means you can step back to appreciate just what a majestic thing this truly is. Right out of the box, it looks absolutely wonderful. Not only very eye-catching on account of the size of it, but also how delightfully chunky he is, and just how much presence it brings, particularly with the light-up features in full swing. Now I often maintain that a lot of ThreeZero stuff just really needs to be seen in hand to fully appreciate, and so I think it is here. After all, I've seen more than a few comments from people querying what the point of this thing is when the Siege toy itself is already very cartoon accurate, but I think when you get it in hand, all of that very quickly fades away, as the finish going on here is just breathtaking and clearly out of sight versus anything the budget of the Generations line would be able to achieve. All of the materials feel very sturdy too, and there's an incredible weight to the figure that makes him a real joy to just pick up and admire. The head sculpt is truly magnificent to behold, and I think really captures the feel of the animation, with those light up eyes bringing the toy to life so well. As I've already said, the chest windows look amazing too, and I love the way the green glow both recreates the cartoon but also adds a real vibrance to the proceedings. It's just so much fun to behold, and I really think makes this figure look very special overall. But really, everywhere you look on this product, it's all good stuff, as every inch of it is covered in little details, whether that's molded nooks and crannies or the impressive weathered finish going on. Again, it's the kind of thing that really needs to be seen up close to fully comprehend, but in comparison to the bare plastic option of the main Siege toy, it's on a whole other level. Ultimately, it is a bit weird seeing something that I know maybe looks a bit like a very oversized version of a popular mainline toy, but trust me when I say it just makes a lot more sense when you actually start messing around with it. The other thing to comment on there is the articulation, with a huge range of motion available in every regard. All of the joints have multiple points or hinges to them, meaning that there's no part of this figure that can't be contorted in some impressive fashion or other. Of particular note is the chest, which rocks from side to side, but then also features an impressive forward hinge towards the top as well as an ab crunch down below, activated by pushing in on his grille plate in a bit of a clever twist. And this carries through to the legs as well, where you'll find the hips have a double hinge option again, and the knees a very satisfying sliding gimmick that is never not fun to behold. I'd initially thought that there wasn't quite enough range in the ankles, but it turns out even they can be extended slightly for a lot more posability than you might first imagine. Add it all up and ThreeZero Optimus looks simply magnificent when posed. You can contort this thing to your heart's content, and honestly it's practically impossible to position him in a manner where he doesn't look simply stunning. There's such a chunky old school vibe to the design that I just love how badass it looks overall. Now, as mentioned, you will need to remove and swap out the hands in order for them to be posed, which is not my favourite solution, but at least there are plenty of great options to be had, and the results do look very expressive, so that's all positive. Of course, the figure also presents as particularly imposing with his rifle positioned in hand, and it makes the overall package here feel much more complete as well. This is definitely how I'll be displaying my copy when I'm done reviewing him, although I will say that I wish the gun felt a little bit more secure in how it's gripped, but still, it works okay. Then you can use the port on his left arm to install the Energon shield should you wish. It just clips into place and feels quite secure once it's on, although I have to say it's really not my cup of tea in terms of the display option, so I'm not sure I'll be using it all that much myself. What I do love very much though is the axe, because my word, it looks fantastic, doesn't it? Just very dramatic, and again, brings a lot of presence to how this toy displays, which I really like. A bit like with the gun, it could arguably be a little more secure than it is, as you're simply relying on the friction of the molded hand to hold it in place, but there's no denying the visual result is really rather spectacular once you get it posed how you want it. And really, that's the whole big selling point of this figure, because quite honestly, I could happily spend many hours just messing around with it, posing it up and admiring it, to say nothing of how excited I am to get it in front of my camera and start shooting away. It's such an extraordinarily good looking product and does a brilliant job at bringing the War for Cybertron animation to life that it's hard not to be impressed with it in hand. I also think that whilst it's still an expensive product, what you get here is actually very good value for money. Now, interestingly, ThreeZero have made him a little bit smaller than some of their other deluxe figures, such as Soundwave here, who I also reviewed for the channel recently, although of course he stands quite a bit taller than their deluxe Bumblebee all the same. Really, the most obvious size comparison with their toys is with their Bumblebee movie Optimus Prime, where you can see that the new War for Cybertron figure is a bit smaller again. Although still, I have to say that I think these two look pretty spectacular together, and it's hard for me not to think that it would be great fun to see ThreeZero do more renditions of the Autobot leader in the future. It was also interesting to see how he shaped up next to the likes of Masterpiece MP1 Convoy, given how he's not that far off in terms of size, although arguably the quality of this guy is even more impressive than on those early Masterpiece toys. Then there's another fascinating comparison to be had with the main generation's depiction of Optimus, although I have the Earthrise figure here standing in due to the absence of the Siege toy in my collection. Seeing the difference between these two in terms of size, but also the finish and materials used, just drives home for me how impressive the ThreeZero product is, and how it definitely deserves a spot in my collection. Overall then, I'm super impressed with ThreeZero yet again. I know some people will be puzzled why this exists alongside the Generations toy, and of course some will grumble about it not transforming, but for my money, none of that is even a consideration once you get your mitts on it. It's quite simply stunning in hand, go and treat yourself, it's a massive and unequivocal toot. Now, as I've already mentioned, this review comes courtesy of TF Source. You'll find a link to their site in the video description below in case you like what you see here today. But I'd love to hear your thoughts as well. Do you like what you see or not so sure? Let me know in the comments. Otherwise, that's it from me, so don't forget to drop me a like if you enjoyed today's video, and have a great rest of your day. TTFN.